Anticlimax.
Why would you do that? Oh, okay. Well, John, I'm not even going to do the introduction. I'll let you do it this time.
No.
Go on. After you.
No.
One of these days, you're going to have to do the introduction.
No.
Hello there, everybody, and welcome to yet another DBAle, another episode of Chris Takes the Mickey of anything that I say.
It's not hard.
But it is it's actually the DBAle Quarter Quell, or the 25th, I can't even say anniversary, but the 25th episode of DBAle. We have now been doing DBAle for just over 2
150.
years.
Okay. Yeah,
2 years, right. Chris.
2 years.
Does it feel like 2 years?
Yes.
Okay. That's fair
maybe
enough.
Longer, actually. It feels like an eternity.
Well, I'll tell you what, in any case, hello there, everyone, and welcome to Redgate DBAle, the podcast that's all about beer and data. And we, of course, as always, are your incandescent hosts. Me, the wonderful, the mysterious, magical Christopher Unwin. I'm Chris. And he's another Chris.
Yeah.
Anyway, I should insert lift music here. Welcome to the podcast. It's nothing but 50 minutes of uninterrupted elevator music.
Unwin.
4th floor, menswear.
Bing.
Anyway, today's theme is actually not elevator music. No.
Sorry, this is a weird thing, but elevator music is one of those things that you don't really get in the UK, right?
No, you make a good point. Except if you go to Alton Towers Hotel, the Adventure Hotel, when you go up in the lifts, the lights kind of dim and go bright and they play adventure music. So it feels like you're on your way to some mysterious adventure, like dun dun dun.
Yeah, that's a very different type of elevator music, though. Like, that's not what people think of elevator music being. But like, you and I have like a very good understanding of what the concept of apparently you don't, but I've got a good understanding of what the phrase elevator music means, despite the fact that in the UK there's no such thing as elevator music. I
have genuinely been in a lift, an elevator.
That's the other thing. We're calling it elevator, right?
Yes, but it's a lift, of course.
Yeah.
Don't at me on Twitter about this one. It is a lift, and I will not hear anything else out about it. But I have genuinely been in a lift, in an elevator in the United States, listening to, I think it's The Girl from Ipanema. That I've definitely done that
That's
before.
The classic.
The thing was, I genuinely couldn't believe it. So I was in this lift with probably a good 5 or 6 people, and I looked up from my phone and just went, oh, and stared at the ceiling where this speaker was. And all of a sudden I had 5 or 6 people just staring at me thinking, oh dear. Oh gosh, there's something not quite right about this one. Anyway. No, today's
they were
theme,
right.
I can't argue with that. Today's theme is actually not elevator music. No, it is actually today. Well, it's not really a theme. We've got a good title, DBAle as a service, or DBAleaas, and for short. And actually, the theme is, where can we put our SQL Server databases? Now, this is something that comes up an awful lot at Redgate Towers, particularly when we're training new salespeople for Redgate, right? Is when we're talking to them to help them understand what Redgate helps with, we have to first get them to understand the scope, the domain, what a database is, and teaching, a bunch of new starters over the course of 2 weeks, first what a database is and how to do continuous integration and delivery with it. That's a big gap to cover in 2 weeks. And one of the biggest problems we struggle with is actually getting across the concepts of where can we put our SQL Server databases. So that's what we're going to have a chat about today. Right, Chris?
Sounds good to me. All of the weird and wonderful cloud-based offerings, largely, because I'm pretty sure people already clued on this whole on-premise thing. I don't think we have to cover that in too much detail.
I don't know. I think there's. Did you just say on premise?
Yeah.
On premises, sir. On prem, short for on premises, not on premise.
No.
You're not on what premise do you, sir? Anyway.
No one cares. On premise.
Anyway, we can't talk about this without a lovely refreshment, of course. You've muted yourself. How did you mute yourself?
I mean, if I hit the mute button, and then I muted myself.
Stop muting and unmuting yourself. Next we'll have Louise, producer Louise, unmuting herself and saying hello. And not that any of these good people would like to hear that. I'm sure they would, but I don't know that she will. Cue Louise.
Hi, guys.
And there she is. Fabulous. Hi, Lou. So Louise is here skulking in the background, taking notes and, I don't know, probably having a beer herself, one would hope. But Chris, naturally, we can't do this episode without a refreshment. And today we have yet another donated refreshment. Again, if anybody feels like donating refreshments to DBAle, then please do feel free to get in touch because, you know, we're a big fan of this whole charity thing and we're willing to accept. We're like a beer. But today we have some beers from, and I'm going to have to get this one right. So this is Robert. Robert is one of our best listeners, one of our most frequent listeners, one of the nicest people you'll ever meet. Met him loads. And in fact, we've already had one of Robert's beers on a previous episode. In fact, after SQL Bits last year. Of course, we couldn't do that this year. SQL Bits wasn't in person. So what did he do? Well, he went ahead and sent us some beer anyway. In fact, he sent us some beer from the Redgate Brewing Company, whom he highly recommends. And we would highly recommend Robert as well. So go and follow him on Twitter at SQL Bob Scott, SQL BOBSCOT, SQL Bob Scott.
Yeah,
and
thank you.
Learn a lot.
Big thank you from me for our second donation. I actually chatted to him for a little bit at Bits recently. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic.
So already said thank you well, not really in person because it was not in person anymore, but
as in person as you can get during a pandemic.
Exactly. And it also turns out you were right. It is not on premise, it's on premises.
Oh.
I hate it when you're right.
I hate it when I'm right too. Thank God it doesn't happen that often.
No, Wikipedia has proved me wrong.
Oh, well, I always like Wikipedia as a source at least. So we've actually got a different one each, right? So Bob actually sent us two different beers, a purple one and a green one. Yeah, each. I should point that out. And I already drank the purple one. But we decided up front that it wasn't just because I couldn't control myself and had to drink it. So you've got the purple one and I've got the green one, and they're both from the Redgate Brewing Company, who are based in Glasgow and have been operating since 2014. So Glasgow's in Scotland, for anyone who doesn't know. Scotland is a wonderful, magical place. Home of the deep fried Mars bar.
Scotland is a country located in Europe, FYI. I didn't say the United Kingdom there because who knows at some point down the future when people are listening to this.
Here's a message to anyone Scottish listening. Run now, save yourselves. Jump, this ship is sinking. Anyway. So I've got the Barefaced Lager. So it is a lager. And yeah, I've not really actually read the can yet, but they openly admit the beer steals its zesty aroma hops from the USA and has notes of fruit and honey, which balance the powerful bitter bite. So yeah, proper Scottish lager. So I've got that. What have you got?
I have the purple one, Glad Eye IPA, a retro India Pale Ale.
What makes it retro?
I don't know. It says it's a stripped back golden IPA, which sounds interesting to me. Unfussy and unapologetic.
In any case,
inspired by classic American craft beers of the 70s and 80s.
Oh, nice. Well, I've actually had the purple one. I enjoyed it whilst watching the first episode of the Great British Bake Off, which is currently going. Fingers crossed for my... Are you watching British Bake Off, Chris?
Of course.
Fabulous. Who's your favourite?
Oh, I like them all at the moment now, actually. Like, yeah, it gets really hard. Of course, everyone loves Lottie.
Big fan of Lottie, absolutely. Not my favourite, but big fan.
I quite like Laura, but my absolute favourite is got to be Peter.
Really? Oh, okay. Well, if you say so.
I love the geeks.
Mine is Emin, just because I think she's brilliant. Like, I'm just going to do it. And then she does it perfectly. Yeah. And you're like, oh, that is a baker.
The whole lot are really good now. I'm really liking the cast. No, it's not a cast. I don't know what it is. What do you call them? The collection of bakers.
Contestants.
Yeah. Because
they're contestants, right?
Exactly. Well, I'm disappointed they don't start with 13 of them.
Baker's dozen. That would be clever. Mr. Trick, never mind. So anyway, it's time to get this particular show on the road, get those buns in the oven and bake. It's time for us to open up our beers. So let's go ahead, Chris.
Are you ready? Ready?
I'm ready. 3, 2, 1.
Ooh.
I didn't hear yours. I heard mine very clearly.
I heard yours. Have you got a glass to pour into?
I do. It's got hearts on it. Look.
Oh my. Oh.
Chris and I can see each other over Zoom. We're recording this on Zoom because actually the audio quality is surprisingly unbad. But there we go.
Maybe we should, like, as a bonus feature, release the video.
Nobody wants to see that, Chris. I'm literally sat here in the darkness because now it gets dark at 5 p.m. wearing a Spirited Away hoodie.
And no trousers.
You can't see. I'm at the table.
So I've poured this very badly, as you'll be able to see if you're a premium user.
If you want the video for DBAle 25, the limited Golden Cough IPA, see what I did there, edition, and that's what I'm actually going to call it, then it's just let us know. Send us a tweet. That would be at Kurzweil Chris, not that he ever uses Twitter. So tweet me at Plant-Based Sequel, and I will send you the recording free of charge, unless you want to provide beer. In which case, I can't say because I'm not a. Does that come under? Isn't there like a contractual obligation not to accept bribes or something?
Yeah.
Is that a bribe?
Yeah, we can't accept anything over like £50, I think.
Oh, well, okay. Well, as long as it's beer, then we're fine.
Yeah.
See, this is why it's worthwhile doing a podcast with your boss, because you can just ask them.
We can also start selling merchandise, because that's what everyone does now.
Well, I would love some merchandise.
And create a Patreon page. Can we do that?
No, we can't do that because we're sponsored already, but I definitely think some merch wouldn't go amiss, and maybe running another competition for said merch. I'm just saying words, and if Louise, you happen to hear these things and think they're a good idea, then I'm just saying it's almost Christmas and 2020 has not been a fun year.
Hey, every day is Christmas when we're around. Hey.
Is that because
it's good Christmas?
Is it because I'm fat and jolly and have a beard?
Yes.
All right, fair enough. Anyway, so we've been rambling on now for goodness knows how long. I can't even see a recording counter. But what I can do is I can say it's time for us to talk about our theme. And our theme is, where can we put our SQL Server databases? So
well, I'll tell you where you can shove your SQL Server databases, Chris.
So normally, at this point, when we're starting with someone who's completely green, it is we have to explain to them what an instance is. I mean, that's kind of, well, no, the first lesson we teach is literally computing fundamentals. So we talk about what is a server, the client-server model. We talk about, what happens. And this is really cool. One of the ways that I explain Visual Studio and SQL Server Management Studio as IDEs, one of the ways I use that is talking about web browsers, because everybody knows at least Internet Explorer and Chrome. And some people know Firefox, and there's other browsers that people know. And I always talk about them as being IDEs, like SSMS, like Visual Studio, and connecting to websites like, www.google.com will be pretty much the same whether you access it from Google Chrome or Internet Explorer, after Internet Explorer falls over itself and then warns you about a security hole that's not there. But you can use both SSMS and Visual Studio to make database changes. So that's kind of how I explain.
You use Firefox. Well, that's a clever idea. That's a really clever idea.
Thank you. And then people kind of get it because they go, oh, so the databases actually still exist behind the scenes, and they don't actually exist as part of SQL Server Management Studio. Once we close Management Studio, SQL Server doesn't die.
Yeah, that certainly beats my method. I just say that SSMS is like Spotify, and that Visual Studio is like Outlook, and people get very confused.
I'm quite confused myself. How is it like Spotify? Oh, is it because it falls over occasionally and you right click and then it hangs for 15 seconds?
No, it's because it's got all your favorite music in it.
Like a database?
What are databases?
I'm so confused. Oh, well. Yeah, so effective. Oh my gosh. We didn't even talk about the beer, by the way. And I have just taken a swig of this Barefaced Lager, and it is absolutely delicious. Drygate Brewery, Glasgow, you have made a lifetime fan. I've had 2 of your beers, and they are absolutely impeccable. So if any of you are in Glasgow, I don't know what the lockdown restrictions are there, but if you can get your hands on some of this Drygate Brewery beer, then do, because, nobody does a beer or a whiskey. No, nobody does a beer quite like the Scottish, I'll tell you that.
No one does a whiskey like the Scottish. Well, what?
I agree, but I didn't want to lose, I don't know, the Irish contingent of our listeners just by saying that, because then I'm going to get lots of hate mail on Twitter like, no, Irish whiskey's better. It's like,
you shouldn't be worried about the Irish listeners. It's the it's the Kentucky-based listeners where you got to be concerned about. Also, yeah, our premium users can see the look on Chris's face when he takes that sip of beer. Another thing that we talk about quite a lot, and you can't really see through the audio, but you can if you're a premium user and get our video feed.
Will you stop saying premium user?
The quality of the foam on top is amazing. It's really
okay,
good.
if you say so.
It does. It forms a really good shape. Look. See? You can't really see it very well.
No.
But you can if you're a premium user.
Stop saying, no, we won't. No. There is no such thing as a premium user. Nobody would want to be a premium user. I don't even know who listens to this. Like, I know at least 3 people who listen. So hello to those 3 people.
Hello, Chris's mum.
She doesn't listen anymore.
Oh, really?
She gave up after like episode 3. She was like, "Oh, you just talk about databases." I was like, "Yeah, that's kind of the point." Anyway. Yeah. Back to SQL Server Databases. So you've got your SQL Server, right? So we've explained to our new starters, hey, this is a server. This is how computing works, light switch on, off. And they have one of these, usually when I'm explaining it like that, people have that light bulb moment where they go, oh, I get it. Because when I sign up to a thing, I give my name and my email address and blah, blah, blah. And then it goes somewhere. Wow. Anyway, that's another subject. That's where we start talking about data masking again. Go back a few episodes, you're fine.
So back to the point, Chris.
So we talk about servers and we talk about what an instance is. And once people get their head around what an instance is, so an installation of SQL Server, they're kind of like, oh, okay, so you can have it installed potentially multiple times on the same server and have multiple instances. And then obviously the default or named instance, you've got a whole bunch of different options there, but they get it. It's a program, it's installed on a server.
Yes.
Fair enough. So let's talk the first option that we have beyond on premises. And that, of course, is...
which was the first one?
What's the first hop? Just virtualize the server.
Oh yeah, the one that really doesn't work is what do you call it when you say like how it's spelled? But IaaS.
IaaS.
IaaS. Yeah. It's a mixture of vowels that just doesn't go together.
IaaS.
Unless it's like, yeah, the problem is that you've got like too many vowels in a row, right? IaaS. No, it just doesn't work. You need like to remove one of the A's or something. So it's like A's.
If you add an E to the end of the A's between it and the S, it could just be someone really excited agreeing to something. Yes.
Or if it's like, is plaid spelled PLIAD?
PLAID. Plaid.
Plaid. No, it doesn't work.
Infrastructure as a service.
Infrastructure as a service is a pretty straightforward option, right? You just take your computer and you put your computer somewhere else. It's
exactly. So instead of the bare metal, instead of the air conditioning and the actual blades and the rent for the warehouse and the XYZ, we just go,
wrap all that up into one charge and get someone else to do it.
Exactly. Who's got good options for that?
Well, who? Basically anyone, right? I mean, there's 1,000,001 vendors who will give you rack space somewhere, including Rackspace.
Including Rackspace, yeah.
Microsoft and, I mean, sure, even Apple probably have an arm somewhere that allows you to spin up an infrastructure as a service system.
That's really interesting. Hang on. Let me just tippity tap on my magical mechanical keyboard and just go Apple Rent VM.
Maybe.
Cloud Mac Rental. Doesn't look like it.
But yeah, like any vendor who basically gets a massive string of servers from HP or IBM or someone puts it in a room somewhere and then rents it out one at a time to people. It's not too hard a business to set up. So you could start that off as quite a small company, really, and I think there are quite a few, and rent out VMs. Why not?
Yeah, and I suppose the big three that we end up talking about mostly, because again, we're dealing with SQL Server here. So generally people using SQL Server that we deal with on a regular basis generally have some kind of in with Microsoft. I mean, Microsoft published their profits for Q3 2020 and it came in at like $38 billion with Azure up like LinkedIn was up like 21 billion. Maybe it was Azure that was up 21 billion. LinkedIn revenue was up and profit was up, and Azure profit was way up. Huh. And I think that's because people are realizing that they don't want to have to go in and maintain physical machines anymore. So they just go, right, tell you what, we'll lease a machine. And this is the interesting bit is then we have to start talking about.
SMB, like it just doesn't really make much sense for you, right? Like, why would you buy a server and then have to worry about the overheads of that when you could just rent it out?
Especially if you've got to replace that disk. Well,
especially if you're you're a Kickstarter company, you don't really want big upfront expenditure.
Yeah.
What you want is something that you can just spin up, and if you need strip costs back, you can very quickly get rid of it.
Yeah,
it makes a lot of sense. And yeah, of course, you naturally tend towards the big dogs as well, because let's face it, economies of scale, having just said that anyone could set this up and there's lots of small vendors, economies of scale really benefit you here. If you just have a hell of a load of servers out in the middle of the Arctic desert or Antarctic desert somewhere.
Yeah.
Then that's perfect. And the idea of like where you can put all these machines that the rent is basically nil, cooling is as cheap as possible. So yeah, it's an interesting one. Well,
I think just to talk about the kind of three main cloud providers that we come across then, that's pretty much Azure, right? Microsoft Azure or Azure for our I actually prefer saying Azure. I think it sounds a bit daring. With us, it's like, yes, Microsoft Azure, Whereas
I
when
only
Americans say
refer
it's
to
like
it as
Azure.
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 Azure. It's a bit more daring.
It sounds like a tiger, like a character out of like a really cool, like He-Man or Thundercats or something like, quick, get after Azure.
Asia. That's what it's not called. Please don't call it that. Asia.
No. Azure.
Yeah. Azure.
Anyway, so Microsoft Azure,
Asia.
and then you've got the company that for some reason loves their TLAs, their three-letter acronyms. That, of course, is Amazon with their AWS, so Amazon Web Services.
Mr. Bezos.
Yes, indeed. The richest man in the world probably knows what we're saying right now.
Yep.
I see you, Echo. Don't you be listening to me. It's okay. She's asleep. Anyway, so you got AWS, and then also Google Cloud as well is pretty much up and coming. I mean, I probably personally deal more with people who are hosting their virtual machines in Rackspace more often than I'll deal with people who are hosting in Google Cloud. But I definitely think
Rackspace makes so the big three are really good, but Rackspace have been doing what they've been doing really well as well. Like I wouldn't discount them by any means.
No, absolutely not. So basically infrastructure as a service, and what you get is you install your SQL Server instances on virtual machines, right? So it's SQL Server installed on a virtual machine. You don't worry about the hardware. You don't have to worry about the electricity, the air conditioning, nothing like that. And basically, you control. It's how much control you want. That's the real key here, right? Is if you want to control the temperature of your machine, stay with on premises, because you're the one who can then stick a thermometer in and go, right, it's 72 degrees Fahrenheit. It's perfect. I like it. I don't know why I went marginally Australian there, I think. Anyway, but you have full control of the underlying operating system, the instance. You've got the manual backups, your recovery. You have full administration control, right?
Yeah. I mean, you have a lot of control with a VM, but yeah, you can do literally what you want with.
Yeah, as long as you don't want to, whip out any RAM, then you're fine.
Yeah, a lot of the problems that you might have. So what's more typical is if you have a config that isn't standard or doesn't fit in the templates that say Microsoft or whatever will give you, because that's one limitation with that offering. You can basically get this size VM. You don't get to say, but I want a 2-core 360 gigabyte RAM VM. Why won't you give me that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is a pretty standard shift, right? Is that you go from on-premises to your SQL Server on your VMs hosted in AWS, hosted in Azure, hosted in Google Cloud, hosted in Rackspace, and you even control the OS, right? So you could be running Linux and SQL Server on Linux on that box, but it's up to you. So what's the next step beyond that?
PaaS.
PaaS or PaaS. I hear a lot of people say PaaS.
Pace.
But if pesos.
Yeah, no, pace.
Wait, is it Mexico that uses pesos? Mexican peso?
I want to say yes.
Louise has chimed in the chat with a yes. So Chris is going to use his funky mechanical keyboard as well, I have no doubt. But Lou has already confirmed to us that it is indeed yes. I feel like there's somewhere else in the world that uses pesos. Is it?
I mean, Spain used to, right?
Spain used to. Is it the Philippines? Philippine pesos?
Americas and the Philippines, yeah.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. I'm going to take my leave right now by drinking some more of this lovely lager. Anyway, PaaS, Platform as a Service. Platform as a service is like a step up, right? So instead of leasing the actual machine from the provider, what we do is we go a step up and we lease just the database. So that effectively means, yes, thank you, give me a single database and I'm going to build stuff in it. I can choose all the objects, the tables, the store procedures, the functions, the views. You think I have, but it still technically counts as platform as a service, and we'll get to that. Okay. Even though it was a later introduction, so we'll get there. But yeah, so you got platform as a service. So we've got on-premises, infrastructure as a service. You have a machine in the cloud, and that is hosted by someone else, and you choose what operating system, how powerful the server is, and install your own programs on it. Platform as a service is literally just that. You get the platform, so the database, and you build it out from there. Your tables, store procedures, functions, views, etc., etc., etc. But that database exists in the cloud, and you get a connection string to that database, right?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you for confirming. I appreciate that.
Yes, that is what happens. And yeah, economies of scale kind of really work out from here for Microsoft, because now they can make a massive VM and put a massive instance and just share out the individual pieces that they need wherever they need. And also then they could actually install whatever operating system that they think is the cheapest to run, which might actually not work with what they were usually using. So maybe they should develop a new version of SQL Server that runs on Linux instead of Windows, and then pretend that they released that version of SQL Server for Linux because that's what they were really offering, and not because it made sense for their Azure offering. But I'm just wondering. I'm just thinking out loud.
The interesting thing to bear in mind, though, is that a lot of people associate the platform as a service offerings as being SQL Server itself, just a platform as a service version. There are quite a few subtle differences, though, as to why a platform as a service or database as a service basically doesn't count as doesn't count as a SQL Server specifically. So it's still technically platform as a service, but it can also be known as database as a service. And the interesting thing about that, of course, is
DBAle as a service.
Not DBAle as a service, DB as a service. But the interesting thing about that is that, of course, you now don't look after the backups and the recovery necessarily. So that's a really interesting one. So there are two main providers of platform as a service SQL Server, MS SQL, and that, of course, is I'll take this one. So it's Azure, obviously, and
Azure.
AWS.
Mm-hmm.
And AWS offers a service called RDS, or AWS RDS, Relational Database Service. And basically, you lease a database. The one strength I would argue that's quite nice from the AWS RDS side is that you actually can get proper .back files from an RDS SQL Server database, which means if you spit that back file out onto an S3 bucket, a secured S3 bucket, there's nothing stopping you from, then later using that in some kind of provisioning process. Not that Redgate would have any vested interest in that, but
I wonder which blog post that links up to someone having already set up a system that grabs a backup file and mounts it into SQL Clone might be relevant here.
Well, Chris, as far as I know, only one such blog post exists. No, actually, there's loads and probably better ones. But yes, plantbasedsequel.com does have one of those blog posts anyway.
Well, you won't let me do the whole premium members thing, but you plug your own blog post whenever you can. Double standards.
It's true. It's true. But that being said, the interesting thing about platform as a service is that obviously you've got the built-in backup and recovery. With RDS, you do get the ability to spit out a .back file, but effectively, you only have control of what's in the database realistically, and that's only includes the database scoped features. But the good thing is, obviously, that comes with the availability offered by AWS or by Azure, and funnily enough, Amazon and Microsoft are both pretty good at building out their infrastructure. So the the chances of me building a SQL Server instance on a machine, say in my house, and that being available 100% of the time versus Microsoft or Amazon doing that, well, And that's the major benefit here, right? Is that instead of worrying about looking after the instance itself, instead of worrying about looking after the server itself, instead of worrying about all of that stuff, I just worry about the thing that ultimately benefits my customers, and that is the database, which is used by my application, my web app, the whatever, to provide a consistent, gosh, I can't remember the word, service to my end users.
Cool.
And that's it. We don't have to worry about the overhead.
We should also say that Google also does a PaaS offering, right?
Does it?
I believe so.
I didn't know that. Is that new?
It's been around for a while.
Oh, well, that's new to me, but
It's not.
yeah. Oh no, actually, they
for
did
sure.
announce that. They did announce that. Yes, I remember. That being said, you did also mention that you didn't think that I missed. You thought that I missed a step, and quite rightly, between our SQL Server on Azure VMs and our Azure SQL database, there is, of course, one additional step, and that is, of course, Chris.
A managed instance. I mean, it's
managed
kind of
instance.
similar to RDS here, right, though? Like, it's same kind of idea. You get an instance level rather than DB level.
It is kind of similar to an RDS, yes, but obviously Microsoft wanted to make sure that they had kind of every level of offering. So there is also a managed instance as well. So it's still much like Azure SQL Database is automatically patched and upgraded. It supports most of the instance scoped features. It has high availability because you're reliant on Microsoft. And the interesting thing is you actually have full control of the instance. So instead of controlling lots of individual databases, you get the hosted installation of SQL Server, and you can just put on the databases that you need.
Wham, bam.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, well, I think that like it's a lot easier for companies to kind of do a lift and shift with that. So especially if you've got an established project and you want to take it into a cloud environment, then doing the whole instance, that just makes it much more straightforward. Whereas
That's a fair point.
If you've got like a new project, then the odds are spinning up an Azure DB would probably make more sense.
Yeah.
You know, these days you want to go down the microservices route wherever you can if you're creating a new project from scratch. So you don't want to have a shared instance just for the sake of it.
No, that's absolutely true. And you know, if you're trying to lift and shift this kind of monolithic, archaic workload into Azure, then you might actually require more rewrites than you're really willing to do by trying to shift everything into Azure SQL database.
Yeah.
But gradually breaking that down into said microservices is absolutely something that I think a lot of people are doing at the moment.
And so I guess two more things on this, but one is like Microsoft were offering quite a lot of benefits to doing that whole lift and shift as well. So for example, extended support onto 2008 R2 when that happened. So you could get 2008 R2 supported for longer than you usually would.
Interesting.
And, you know, if you did want to do this, then we have good friends at Coeo, for example, who are experts in this. So, yeah, we definitely could point you in the right direction.
Yeah, so if you're looking at potentially lifting and shifting your workload into something, well, into Azure specifically, then definitely check out Coeo, COEO, who will obviously be more than happy to help talk you through the various options that you have available. But there is one other thing that we should mention before we go on to kind of our final segment as well. And we've talked about a couple of things here. So we've talked about virtual machines, infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, Azure SQL Database, Azure SQL Managed Instance, and also RDS SQL Server. But one thing we haven't mentioned is Elastic Pools. And
of course,
Elastic Pools is a really interesting concept as well, and that exists within the Azure stack as well. And that is basically a collection of databases that are databases as a service. And the idea is that whilst you have full control of this pool of databases, they're automatically scaled. Where you have unpredictable usage, you're able to kind of scale the ability between those, or share the resources between those databases so that one can scale up and scale down as necessary. And it creates this kind of web of databases that meet your needs as and when they scale based on the application, based on which database they're using.
The elastic scaling element of that is really key, and that is another huge benefit from going to the cloud. This is something you just can't do with on-premises kit, right? Like if you, let's say you launch a new video game and it requires a database in the back end, or to be honest, it requires just servers. If you have elastic scaling, then you have your launch date. That's when you have your key amount of users. You scale to the capacity by blowing through Microsoft's capacity, expand out as much as you need, and then shrink back down when your user base inevitably calms down a bit post-release.
Personally, I'd be really interested to find out how Among Us did it, because obviously Among Us went from being a game that literally no one had heard of a couple of months ago, and now it's one of the biggest games in the world, and trying to play it at peak time is almost impossible. It's based on kind of a very straightforward concept, and it's like a team of 3 developers working out of a shed or something. But now you've got like major YouTubers playing it and streaming it. You've got people, you've got hundreds of thousands, millions of people playing this game. I'm really interested how they scaled out their infrastructure.
Games is like a really interesting example to talk about when you talk about software development. We're kind of going on a tangent here, but I think it's an interesting one. But because like a lot of video games are very traditionally developed, and it kind of makes sense. They're very big projects compared to a lot of kind of enterprise applications ultimately. And so they'll often have huge problems when they have release, because release is a scheduled thing. Launch happens, you have like this massive patch that comes in, and the classic one is like Call of Duty, I don't know, whatever's popular with the kids these days. You've got something that's really hyped up. Yeah, it gets released and you have this huge influx of players. And it's amazing to me how often you still get reports of day one multiplayer problems. Yeah, because they don't have the elastic scaling in place.
I mean, it's like when you get results day for exams, and all of a sudden the servers for university admissions falls over, or anything.
See, that I kind of understand a little bit more, because I think university admissions website is probably not where there's a huge amount of developers who are motivated to work in agile ways, but
yeah, but at the same time, they kind of know when their main influx of users is gonna come, right? Like it's not published 2 years ahead of the date.
Yeah, but like if they're on a traditional system, then they've got to get budget to get the extra servers in, and only to have that capacity for that peak point. It's probably cheaper for them not to worry about it. Whereas, yeah, you think about a massive video game publisher, they should probably have realized by now that they have a big spike on launch day.
Yeah.
And yeah, if you have on-premise kit, you have to buy all the kit for your peak time if you need to service every user. If you have elastic scaling in place, then you don't need that. You just scale up to your peaks, which is really cool.
That's true.
Again, microservice infrastructure and all the joys you get with containers, all of this stuff goes really well and really nicely together. So you basically spin up other services as and when you need them.
Yeah, no, it's true. It's true. So that's cool. And Elastic Pools, as we were talking about, still falls under database as a service, really. So you still got Azure SQL Database, Elastic Pools, and managed instance. Oh, gosh.
Last thing on this tangent, but like, again, like the comparison between thinking about video games and how video games are shifting away from waterfall to agile development, and how that's perceived in the market is a really interesting thing to look into. That's the last thing I'll say on that. Sorry, carry on, Chris.
So we've had a talk. We know about on-premises. We know about infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, and database as a service. And it's all about generally the levels of virtualization that we're willing to accept. And of course, the loss of control that we're willing to accept when it goes through kind of the how much control you have. Well, I don't have control over the machine or the instance, etc., etc. So you give that up, but you gain something that can just be leased and a cost that can ultimately be saved. But that brings us now time full circle to our favorite segment, of course. We've put that segment to bed. It's now time for the
News.
NEWS. It's in the news.
Oh, I just got that.
You're welcome. So there's three pieces of news we want to cover. Now it's worthwhile us doing data breach monthly and me handing over to you because you're the one who's been looking into this, and then I'll cover the other ones as well.
All right. So our big, well, you want to start with data breach?
Yeah, data breach monthly. Everyone's here for data breach monthly. We know they love it. We know you love it, listeners.
It's just a short one. So you might have seen the news about British Airways, the fine from the ICO being stripped back down from 183 million to a mere 20 million pounds, which is still a massive fine. The reduction in fine is what I'll talk about in a second. Actually, the original fine. So this came from virtual credit card skimming. So someone managed to put in place a virtual redirect on credit card details and could effectively digitally skim credit card details for quite a lot of people. There was about 244,000 people got caught by this. So it's third-party code that was ultimately responsible, not BA code. I think they implemented, I think it was a chat bot. And I can't remember if it was the Mage Cart system that we were talking about quite a while ago that was responsible for it.
Oh, I don't know.
But anyway, so they had this virtual credit card skimmer on their website for longer than they should have done. And they found out about it. They didn't tell anyone about it, as all the great companies do.
Standard.
And then they did eventually get caught, or it got found out. And so, yeah, the ICO leveraged this massive fine, which was the biggest in history at the time, 183 million pounds. Of course, then there was a pretty good response from BA once the ICO were involved. So they very quickly stepped things up. And also their revenue kind of took a massive hit for some reason. Couldn't think what that was. As a result, the ICO lowered their fine to 20 million, which is, yeah, I mean,
it's still the largest fine ever issued by the ICO.
Yeah. Part of me is like, oh, they should have got their comeuppance. The other part of me is thinking, yeah, I mean, I kind of see why. Like it does.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does make sense. So yeah, that's it from me for data breach news.
Yeah, really interesting on the fines there. But the point is that, you know, even through a pandemic, regulation still has teeth, right? And even the regulators in South Africa have basically said, yeah, we're not giving anyone a break for Popia. Like, we don't care that there's a pandemic on. We're still going to levy fines, and we're going to be harsh. Basically, the South African regulator's been like, no, this is still happening, and it's still very much happening. You got to be compliant, even though we're going through this. Sort it out. And it's really, really interesting to see how that's happened.
I also found the response from BA pretty interesting because they can't, for legal reasons, ever basically say, yeah, okay, we accept that one. But they as good as did. So they said that they can see where the ICO was coming from, which is a very interesting way of saying, okay.
Yeah. Oh, well, okay. Our bad. Oops. No, fair enough. And there's only two more exciting pieces of news for us to share with these gentle listeners before we allow them to continue with their day. I'm sure you're all up to something really nice. And here's a quick reminder. Remember to drink enough water, stay hydrated. Remember to give yourself a break during the day. And just remember to tell yourself how much you mean to yourself as well. I'm pretty awesome. Chris, you're pretty awesome. Lou, even though you're on mute, you're pretty awesome. We're all awesome. So keep reminding yourself how much you matter, because it's really important.
I disagree with the statement. Chris, you are not awesome. I am the only awesome Chris on the call.
Okay, that's fair enough. I'll give you that. But at the same time, there is two pieces of news that's really exciting to share. The first of these is, we'll go with the slightly more, hey, I really care about my servers route. So really exciting news from Redgate HQ, and that is that we have now released SQL Monitor version 11. And one of the main highlights of this includes, obviously, given that we've been talking about database as a service, platform as a service, one of the main highlights of Monitor version 11 is support for AWS RDS SQL Server. So completing that support for the AWS stack as well. It's a really cool piece of work. It's been exceptionally hard. The developers have been working their backsides off, and it really is going to be very, very exciting. So that V11 is something that actually, depending on what date, I say it's been released, depending on what date you're listening to this, it's been released, but if you're listening very, very soon, if you're a really avid fan of DBAle, then it's probably coming like imminently. It's something that you can expect to see very, very soon. And it's like I said, really exciting. So if you're interested in seeing what SQL Monitor V11 has to offer you, go ahead to the website, check it out. Keep your eye on the release notes. If it hasn't been released yet, it should be any moment, basically. And
tip from me, if you go to monitor.red-gate.com, that's our public-facing demo site, and we basically always have the latest version running there. So once it's released, it'll be there, and you can click and play around as much as you like. I
Absolutely.
also did a webinar that was released yesterday at time of recording. So that is Tuesday, the 27th of October, with some of the development team going through some of the wonderful new features of the version 11 release. Absolutely. Including RDS, TempDB, performance improvements, and a new documentation site.
I'm really impressed actually by the new TempDB monitoring features. Those have already been released to monitor.red-gate.com. So anyone who's listening, you can go there and drill down into instance level and go down to TempDB, brand new, really, really interesting. Definitely go and have a look at that. But yeah, Monitor V11, tons of functionality, very, very exciting to come. So go ahead, check out the webinar that Chris mentioned. If you go to the Redgate website and go to the community page, the Redgate Hub, you'll be able to find our online events, including that recorded webinar, which you can then grab a copy for yourself. Go ahead and check out monitor.red-gate.com to have a play around with Monitor yourself. And of course, do feel free to download a free trial and see how it works on your service for yourself. It's a wonderful piece of technology. It really gives you the insights that you need.
Me and Chris, of course, happy to help anyone out who wants it as well if they do get it set up.
Absolutely, and feel free to get in touch as well, DBAle@red-gate.com, or you can tweet us or anything. Just let us know if you want a hand and we'll be more than happy to help out. The final piece of news that we have, though, as well, is that it's Redgate's this week, in the last week, it has been Redgate's 21st birthday. So we just want to wish a very, very warm happy birthday to Redgate. Been around for 21 years, since 1999, a long time ago with our first ever product, Aardvark. So yeah, very long time in the making, but as always, a pleasure to work for a wonderful company with wonderful people, and hopefully a company that will continue to go from strength to strength. So happy birthday to Redgate, to everyone working at Redgate. Ironically, literally like in the middle, smack bang in the middle of my birthday and Chris Kurzweil's birthday as well in October, literally right in the middle. I turned 29, Chris turned 31. I'm just pointing that out.
I was
I'm
going to
still
make
in
the
my
joke
20s.
of you turned 20, I turned 43.
Yeah, no. So yeah, Redgate in the space of 2 weeks, I was 29, you were 31, and Redgate was 21. So Redgate's the youngest of the three of us at the very least.
And Redgate can legally drink, so I guess cheers to that.
Yes, absolutely a cheers. Unfortunately, as our premium users will now see, I am down one beer. So we done. Sad. But that is DBAle 25, the quarter quell, the 25 months of continuous, constantly listening to Chris's ridiculousness over and done with. So thank you all for staying with us for these past 25 episodes. Here's to another 25 as well. If you're interested in listening to something a bit spookier for Halloween, do please feel free to check out some of our past episodes. My personal favorite, Servers That Go Bump in the Nighttime, a great Halloween episode of DBAle as well. But for now, it's thank you so much from me. A happy birthday to Redgate. Go and check out SQL Monitor 11. And of course, for now, Chris, cheers.
Cheers.